Well, good morning, good morning. No Howard today. You've got me. And of course, Dave and Paul, thank you for joining us today. Howard is busy on with a client out in the wilds of Norfolk, and sends his apologies that he can't be here. But at least I don't have to have him sending me the first question when I'm not expecting it. So we'll see who gets the first question this time. So thank you for joining us this morning. Really lovely to see you all here as we talk about, are your employees fit to go again? So really we're talking about burnout, we're talking about well-being, we're talking about health and employee engagement. So as I'm filling in for Howard, I have looked up a few statistics for you. So not as many as Howard gives you, but just a few pertinent ones. So stress continues to be one of the main causes of short and long-term absence. 76% of organisations report some kind of stress-related absence, and that goes up to 92% if you just look at large organisations. But for kind of our size organisations, 76% dealing with absence related to stress. And the two commonest reasons are heavy workloads, according to the research, followed by management style as the main causes of stress-related absence, and actually dropping quite a long way down the list on non-work related issues. So things that are happening with health or family or relationships outside of work. So apparently 1 in 6.8 people experience mental ill health in the workplace, and poor mental health impacts productivity for 1 in 5 people. So there's a direct correlation, according to the research, between employee well-being and engagement. And if you get it right, it can lead to improved business outcomes. So in 2019, Gallup did a study that said if employees had better well-being in the first year of their job, then they tended to have better engagement in the second year of their job. So that was an interesting bit of data. Mind did some research that said that 60% of employees said they'd feel more motivated and more likely to recommend their organisation as a good place to work if their employer took action to support mental well-being. And Deloitte, obviously pretty legit organisation, they reckon that for every £1 spent by an employer on mental health interventions, they get £5 back in reduced absence, presenteeism and staff turnover. So some stats for you there. I have got a couple of reports that I found that were really interesting reading on this subject. So if anybody wants those reports, drop a note in the chat box or give me a call, drop me a note on LinkedIn. I'll send those reports to you. So stats over. Let's have a talk about some of the practical things that we can do as organisations and think about in recruitment. So Paul, Dave, whichever one of you wants to go first, can you share with us some of the most common signs of burnout in recruitment teams? How do you spot burnout in recruitment teams, and what strategies have you seen that will effectively address those sorts of issues?
Okay, you want me to go first, Dave, or do you want to crack on?
No, that's...
Okay. Look, I think this is the time of the year now, as we get into this kind of autumn/winter period where, and coming up to Christmas particularly, where people start to exhibit a level of fatigue. And this year particularly has been, for most recruitment businesses, tough. And it's been tough for probably about a year, because I think when you look at the REC stats, you can see very clearly the demise of, or at least the sort of tail away of permanent roles from clients, and maybe some inertia from candidates, and all of that started, I think, about this time last year. We could see that happening. So people have been sort of dealing with a very tough market for at least 12 months now. And it wouldn't be of any great surprise to find that people, as we come into the darker months leading up to Christmas, are exhibiting this, signs of being tired and, to use the phrase, burnt out. How do you know that? Well, I think it comes down to something pretty straightforward. And that is that as bosses, as leaders, and with your senior teams, you need to be very close to your people. What does that mean? I think it means lots of one-to-one conversations with people. It's important, obviously, to see them in group settings, but you need to be very close to them to understand how they're feeling, the impact of a hard year on them from, as you said a moment ago, mental well-being perspective, but also for some people financially, it's been a tough year. And what impact is that having on them on a personal level? And essentially, how are they feeling about recovering from this current situation? Obviously, there are some people, thank goodness, who are doing extremely well still. Thank goodness for those people. But I think for most people, it's been a pretty challenging year. So it is about, I think, getting very close to people, making sure you understand what's going on. And that's on a one-to-one basis. We'll come back to perhaps how you give group messages a bit later in the conversation. But I do genuinely think it's about getting tight to people and understand what's going on with them as individuals.
Dave, anything to add in terms of how you spot?
Yeah, I think we tend to work a job. We tend to work with the founders and the owners of the business, and then sometimes we're working with the staff as well. But most of the time, it's with the senior leadership team or the owners, and I tend to see those signs from the leaders themselves. And it's normally articulated in phrases like, "Oh, so and so's got another day off sick," or "Oh, I can't believe it, but they're not in again," or whatever it may be. I mean, it's the leaders expressing in their words and in their way some form of exasperation that things aren't going quite the way they want them to be with individuals in their teams. And then when you just dig a little bit deeper under the surface, you realize that it's a pattern. And that, for me, is where the leaders need to step up and address, actually, why am I feeling like this about this person? And what is it about this person? What is going on? How can I get a bit closer to them, rather than necessarily dismissing it as just something that isn't important? Because it really is important. So I tend to see it first, Heather, in the leadership teams rather than in the individual staff, because I'm not as close to the individual staff.
Yeah.
Given that it's been a while since I've actually run a business where I've had lots of individual salespeople reporting to me.
Yeah. And from an HR point of view, the things that I will see are absolutely that. So leaders coming to ask advice because they've got an increased absenteeism with individuals or teams, and that's an absolutely classic example that there's something not right, is that you get an unexplained increase in absenteeism. But there's also some other things like irritability, lateness, tiredness,
increased sickness.
Yeah, some kind of personality changes you see in people. They either become more outgoing or more withdrawn, but it's something that's different from the normal. And I think your point, Paul, about being close to people means that you're way more likely to spot those differences. But they can be, but also understand that you can't always spot this. There's a really good advert going around at the moment on social media, set in a football ground. With football,
I've seen
really,
that.
really good. And it really is saying you don't always know. It's difficult to spot, but there are some obvious signs, and absenteeism, sickness, personality changes, irritability, those are all things. But being close to your people's really important. In your experience, though, trying to look on this in terms of a positive, what can we do about it way, what are the key factors that will contribute to a healthy and a motivated recruitment team, and how can leaders foster and maintain those conditions?
It's a great question, actually. Firstly, I think, and it's totally understandable, we're in an industry which is all about results. I don't like the word pressurized, because I think, when you join a recruitment business, when you get into the industry, you know that you're paid as a consultant to produce results. So it comes with the territory. But it can be stressful sometimes, no question. I think most of that stress probably comes from within people's own psyche rather than the pressure placed upon them. But nevertheless, it's there. And I think that we have a tendency to manage people very strongly through KPIs and metrics. Not that I'm against that necessarily, in the sense of using KPIs and metrics to help govern or provide a roadmap to getting getting consistent success. But I think we can be guilty of beating people too hard sometimes with those numbers. And I think it's trying to find the balance when you are a leader, when you run a business or you are a team leader, between making sure that people have a very clear understanding of what it's going to take to get the results that they need, that we need as a business to maintain profitability, and at the same time making sure that the environment that people work in is a happy and healthy one in terms of an enjoyable place to be. You've got to mix the hard work with some fun, with enjoyment, with creating an open and transparent environment so that people are aware of what's going on. Sometimes people ask me, should I share bad news with staff? Should I share the difficulties and challenges? And I think the answer is, in general terms, yes. I mean, choose your language carefully. But if you choose to keep people in the dark, that will create even more stress and problems. So it's making sure that people are aware of what needs to be achieved and expressing methods and showing them methods of getting to the levels that are required, but at the same time being entirely supportive, creating an enjoyable experience. Because I think if people work in what they perceive to be an incredibly stressful environment where it's severe, it's what's the word I'm looking for, dictatorial, then we know people vote with their feet. They won't put up with that level of anxiety for too long. And we also know, especially us people in recruitment, there are plenty of jobs out there, plenty of options. So you have to find the balance. I think it is about that. It's about trying to get that happy experience going. I can tell you briefly, and I'll let Dave jump in a sec, of course, that when I think back to my own experiences over the last 40, 50 years, the things that I'm probably most proud of, not necessarily the times when I was able to enjoy with my team great success, but I'm probably proudest, if you like, of myself about the times that I enjoyed with my team, really difficult, challenging times, and nobody left me. We had so that blitz experience where everybody's head was down. We knew we were having difficult times, but it was incredible fun at the same time. Made it, we increased the level of jollity in direct proportion to the challenges we were experiencing, and everybody stayed, and we battled our way through those moments. So I think it's just trying to find that balance, making sure that even during the tough times, we make sure people enjoy coming into work.
Yeah, I agree. I think also it's about understanding people's expectations. In my experience in the last 3 or 4 years, people's expectations of their employer, of their boss, have changed. I think COVID brought a massive change to the workforce. We've seen that in the balance of work, people coming into the office and staying at home. And I think people's expectations of their boss, of their work, of the purpose of which they do things have changed. And I think as leaders, our responsibility is to understand that change so that we can engage more directly with our employees. If you're running a firm of 50 people, you may not know all those 50 people, but you'll know your 5 or 6 leaders quite closely. And if you can understand what's driving them, what the pressures that they're facing with the team below them, then I think you will have a more engaged workforce and therefore a happier workforce. If you've got a team of 8 or 9, then perhaps you probably should know each of those people's, what their stories are. Because I do think work has changed, and I do think it's going to change again. And the way that I ran companies, or the way that I was a leader in companies, I don't think that the skills that I had all those years ago apply so much today. I think you've got to understand in a much more engaging way what it is that drives the individuals that you are expecting them. As Paul says, it is a pressure job. We are there to perform. It doesn't matter whether you're at the front end or whether you're in the support teams. There's a lot of expectation on people today. So in that environment, you've just got to understand what makes them tick. And if you can understand what makes them tick, then you've got a better chance of engaging with them, a better chance of them being as happy as they can be, and then you can take it from there.
Yeah, and there are, I think, well, the theory goes, if I remember back to my training, that there are 5 aspects to mental well-being. Yeah. So you've got career well-being, social well-being, financial well-being, physical well-being, and community well-being. And really the one that underpins all of those is career well-being. Yeah, if we can have problems in all of those, or we can have challenges in all of those, or we can have success in all of those, but the one that underpins it, because the amount of time we spend at work, is career well-being. And so I think as organizations, we really do have a responsibility to foster a good culture in our organizations that supports people's well-being. And we'll come on in a bit more detail in a minute to how we can do that. But in terms of assessing the overall well-being and morale of their teams, are there any specific metrics or indicators you think people should be looking at? Any measures that we should have in place that we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, I think you said it earlier, Heather. I think, look for the signs. If you've got increased absence in the business, if people are suddenly off sick regularly, coming in late, wanting to leave early, taking long lunch breaks, a lack of focus, people really, not focusing for very long, finding it difficult to maintain concentration. Body language. I mean, we talk, obviously work from home makes it difficult physically to see people. I mean, look at us right now. You can see us from the chest up. But, when you're actually in front of people, physically seeing them, you can spot some of those signs, body language, their general demeanor, their facial expressions, their basic body posture often gives you very clear signals. Also, I think, it's about keeping your ear to the ground. It's always the case, isn't it, that our people know about issues inside the business perhaps often before we do. People disappear off to the kitchen and chat to each other or whatever, the proverbial photocopy conversations. And, very often people know that someone's distressed or unhappy before we get the signals ourselves at sort of a leadership level. Again, very importantly, it's important to stick tight to people, all of your people, to assess what's going on. If you're talking about metrics, indicators, I think, again, making sure that we are asking people's opinions, not just verbally and one-to-ones, as I said earlier, but also on a regular basis, sending out surveys, if that's the expression, asking people to give you information about how they're feeling about the business and their general sense for what's going on in the company. You touched on this a moment ago, and I think it's true, Heather. Creating a family environment is really important for lots and lots of reasons, not least that within a family, most people feel completely capable and comfortable about speaking their minds. And, that's what you want. As a manager, as a leader, you want people to be honest with you. You may not agree with their perceptions. You may not agree with their views, but we should be in a position where we are, asking people to speak their minds, because that's what a democracy is about in any situation, whether it's political or in a country. And in a sense, that's what goes on in a business. You want a democracy. You want people to feel comfortable to speak their minds. And I think that whether you do that in writing or you invite them to do it verbally, one-to-one, or in a group, those things are super important. And you don't do it once a year. You do it on a regular basis.
And I was taught this by an American guy who was my boss when back in the day at Spring, and it's always resonated with me. And it was, don't ask somebody how they are if you haven't got the time to listen to the answer. It's better just not to ask, because there's nothing worse than, how are you? Okay, great, thanks, I'm moving on. And we do live in a pressurized environment. We there are objectives, there are things that that we know we have to get on with, but that little bit of kindness, that little pause, and that listening and actually understanding and seeking to understand actually says a lot more than waiting for your quarterly performance appraisal, for example. Paul, to your point, don't just do it every quarter, or if you could do that on a regular basis. And I know when we lost Billy, and that was a tough time for us to go through. The thing that I remember very clearly was people saying to me, how are you today? Rather than how are you? Because today I may be great, but tomorrow I may not be. And if you put the word today on the end of that sentence, you then really have to listen. And because even behind yeah, I'm fine, there could be a litany of things going on in that person's life. And if you're a good leader and you're tuned into them, you'll pick that up, and you may then want to go back to them at another point in the day to say, hey, you know, I noticed your answer wasn't quite as I don't know, as thorough as it could have been. Is everything okay? And I think those little indicators as a leader will help get the best out of your people, because you'll understand them more.
Yeah, and I think to add to both of those comments and thoughts, it's really that in some of our organisations you can't be close to everybody.
No.
Yeah, so some of the people listening are from organisations that are a little bit bigger than that, and they just don't. It's not feasible. It's not possible. So there are some things that I think you can measure. So lots of organisations these days have employee assistance programs. Yeah. Employee assistance programs, you can actually provide them relatively cost effectively. They'll never tell you who calls them, because it's an entirely confidential service, even from the person who's providing it. But what they will tell you is how many people, how many calls they're getting, how many people are accessing the website information you're providing. So keeping an eye on the use of your employee assistance program, and if it's going up, understanding that that might indicate there's something going on in your organization, can be a really interesting metric. Yeah, you can measure absence levels. You can actually track it and measure it. You can measure whether people are using all their holiday or not. So that can be a really good indicator. You know, a lot of people introduce, you know, unlimited holiday, thinking it's a really great thing for well-being, and what happens is the opposite happens, and people use less holiday, and it actually works against well-being policies. So thinking about, are people feeling safe enough to take time off, to take the holiday that they're entitled to and that they need, and are you encouraging them to do it? There's some really practical ways that you can do it. And I love the thought about, you know, what you're talking about, Dave, about asking people about how they are. I think we ought to make sure that our managers know that's a requirement of them.
Yeah.
You know, their job isn't just to measure KPIs and performance metrics, it's to understand how people are, and that they should have a conversation completely separately from anything to do with performance and KPIs, that does say, how are you today? And adding today on it, I think it's a great idea. But you know, do we make sure our managers and our leaders in our delegated organization understand that we're interested in how their team is feeling? Do we ask them as leaders, how's your team doing? You know, are they under too much pressure? Do we talk about that to the leadership team as well, as understand ourselves for leaders? I think there's lots of things that we can measure and look at, and ask questions about how people are feeling and how morale is generally, to really understand what's going on in the organization, and to make sure people know that this stuff's important, because it does genuinely directly impact on the performance of the business. So Howard's given me a question to ask now that I'm absolutely bemused about where it fits, so I'm really looking forward to your answers. Howard, thanks for this one. I knew you'd get me. If you couldn't get me with the first question, you'd put one in the middle. So how can recruitment leaders identify and address any specific challenges or bottlenecks in the hiring process that might be affecting their team's performance or satisfaction? Are you ringing Howard to ask him what you mean?
Mr. Greenwood on the phone from
Norfolk. Does he mean recruitment process in terms of people joining the business, or does he mean the hiring process in relation to making placements? Do we know?
Absolutely no idea.
Not a clue. Okie doke.
I reckon he means performance of the business rather than.
So this is people joining the company. Is that what you're thinking? All right. Well, let's take that then, because I mean he's not here, so if we've got it wrong, he's not going to shout, is he? So
he's everywhere, Paul.
He's all pervasive. I think. This is a completely separate subject, and that is that, you know, are we bringing in the right kind of people for the business, and are we, given the current scenario that we're in as an industry and the changing face of recruitment and society in general, i.e. through things like technology and AI and so forth, This is a big subject. It's probably worthwhile for another webinar, I suspect. But it is a big question. I deal with this, as I'm sure you guys do, on a daily basis. The people that we have in the company and the ones we're bringing in, are they fit for purpose? Are they fit for the roles that we have? Should we be analysing the roles, the job descriptions that we have and we consider to be standard? Are they fit for purpose going forward in the next year, 2 years, 3 years? I'm personally one of those people that for some years now have talked about moving away from, in many instances, a 360-degree model, because we know it's increasingly difficult to find people that can do all of those things. But then I would have said that 40 years ago. I still think it was just as difficult then finding people that had the capacity to do 360-degree recruitment. And as a result, we bring people in and ask them to do everything: BD, find candidates, arrange interviews, go on meetings, and so on and so on. And very few people have the ability or indeed the desire to do all of those things. So I think when you look at job descriptions going forward and we look to 2024 and beyond, and we're thinking of recruitment for our own purposes, I think it's time to step back and ask ourselves, is it time to revise our job descriptions? Are the people working for us today capable of doing what we need them to do, what our clients need from them in the next year, 2 years? If they are, great. Then we also want to be thinking about coaching and mentoring those people, helping them to develop and move forward, because we're in a very fast changing environment. And if they're not, then do we want to get rid of them? Is that the answer? Or do we look for a role within the business that will fit their characteristics and their abilities? There are lots of big questions here to ask. One thing's for sure, though, I think you've got to consistently look at what markets we're entering, the challenges that are out there. And the answer to the question, I think, is to make sure that we're very close to our clients to understand what it is they want from us and our candidates. And now is the perfect time of the year to be doing that. In the next 2-3 months, particularly, getting out and sitting in front of our clients to understand what they want from us and what they expect in 2024 is super important. And this time of the year is the best time of the year, between October and December, to be doing that. The answers come from our clients and our candidates, and we need to step back then and assess whether we have a team that can handle what those clients and candidates want from us. Look at coaching and training, and indeed, as I say, consider our job descriptions. I mean, we could go on. I could go on and on, but I think I'll move off.
You?
Me? I know it's difficult to believe.
Never. It actually brings to mind somebody I was coaching who's at a director level in an organisation, who was incredibly successful, making regular placements, managing the people in her team, but whose immense sense of frustration and impact on her mental health came from the fact that the business wasn't hiring enough people to fill every vacancy that she could have worked. So there was so much work. I mean, you kind of have to say, what, how, why is that happening when there's all, there's this. So I think sometimes that these bottlenecks can come from strange places, and that source of mental health issue for her was the fact that she knew there was more business that they could be doing if they'd had more people in the team.
I think, and I would add to, obviously agree with all of what you've just said. I think one of the things that when we're looking at job specs and matching job specs to people, and then other bottlenecks in the process, for me, a key question for you as a leader to answer is this person likable? We used to have this thing in recruitment that if they were really nice, that was a real negative word. If they were likable and nice, they weren't going to be very good, because you need to be hard-headed and aggressive. Now, that may sound like that's something from 20 years ago. I experienced this in an interview situation about 3 weeks ago, where the boss was basically saying, oh, they're too nice, they're never going to make it in recruitment. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Because that was a bottleneck in their recruitment process, because that person ticked almost every box, but it was the attitude of the owner and the senior leadership team that was thinking, actually, they can't be any good because they're nice.
Yeah.
I find that so unbelievably frustrating. The number of people making recruitment decisions, Dave, who have those sorts of ideas, that there are just weird things that they think predicts success, which just has no evidence to have anything to do with predicting success. I find it infuriating.
And it was immensely frustrating. And I think I'm a nice person, and my first reaction was I wanted to hit them.
That seems like
therefore proving what a nice person you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Proving my own theory that it doesn't matter. But the point was, it was just I then had to have this conversation, which I thought I've gone back to Wall Street in 1987. It was one of those really weird things. But I do think as a bottleneck in the process, it is trying to understand that yes, there's a job spec and you want to match that. But your company has a purpose. You as a leader have a vision. Do the people get that? Can they articulate it? And can they work well with the other people?
Yeah.
Or can they learn it? Are they trainable? Are they trainable?
It isn't just can they work well with the sales force if they're salespeople. They've got other people to consider from the HR team, the marketing team, the finance team.
Yeah.
They've got to work well with them because collectively we're on a journey together.
Yeah.
And given that most companies have got less than 10 people, it does matter how you are with everybody.
Yeah,
couldn't
absolutely.
agree more. Listen, the old sorry, Heather, just quickly. Old 70s and 80s.
Better be quick. We're running out of time.
Already was nice guys come last, and you said you were accused of being too nice. I was also accused of being too nice and passed over for promotion when I was in my 20s, and finding that incredibly insulting. And yet we haven't done too badly in the industry, have we? So, and that is at the end of the day, I always, when I interview people, I ask myself a question which you have asked yourself, which is, would I buy from this person? Do I trust this person? Do I like this person? I think that's a very important point. Sorry, Heather, I will be quiet now.
So what role do you think personal professional development plays in keeping recruitment teams motivated and engaged?
I think it's massively important. I think, we've always mentioned that learning and development isn't a one-off item. You don't do it just when people start. It's a constant. And professional development is incredibly important for people. We know when people leave businesses, when we interview people, when we speak to our candidates, one of the biggest factors in people leaving businesses is that they feel undervalued. They don't feel they're being developed. They're being given the opportunity to grow, to learn, and all those things. We know that. We hear it every day. So if we know that to be a truth, then we also need to be champions within our own businesses when it comes to learning and development, professional development of our people, whether they've been with us for 3 weeks or they've been with us for 30 years. It's really important, and not least the fact that we are working in a time, and it's not going to change, of immense change. I mean, it's immense change. We talked in the past, we've said very often in the last year or two about 3-month sprints, and instead of worrying too much about 2-3 year plans. Why do we talk like that? Because we know that things are changing at this incredible rapid rate. Now, if we accept that, then we must make sure that we support the people in our companies, that they are provided with constant L&D, constant professional development, professional training, whether we provide that internally or externally, or a combination of the two. The one thing for sure, though, is that if we fail to address the support and the help our people need, we are absolutely preparing to fail. We have to make sure our people are given every opportunity to grow, to develop. And that may mean that we find people also want to move and develop in different directions, sometimes within our businesses, and sometimes they want to leave us because they want to do other things that we can't help them with. But that's part and parcel of growing a business. And just because we're nervous about people wanting things we can't give them doesn't mean we shouldn't provide professional development for them.
And I think at an interview stage, Heather, one of the things I would ask is to take me on your learning journey. What have you read? What courses have you undertaken? How do you understand more about what's going on in the world of work? Those sort of questions. And it doesn't matter what level that is. That could be somebody straight out of university looking for their first job, or it could be somebody who's more senior, who's in their 50s, who's looking for something else in their career. Just because I believe very much that everybody can be trained and everybody can learn and become different, can become better, but it's helpful to know whether they have an attitude for development, an attitude for learning. Because if they do, it's just going to make it a lot easier. Some people may blithely say, I mean, I can think of it in my own family, they're not great readers, but they can pick things up that's a bit faster. We live in a generation where speed is important, but at least if they're looking at things and learning, and they've got an attitude to that, then we can help develop them.
Attitude is everything with learning, because I've certainly come across people working in clients who we know they could be better, but they are not willing to listen. They are not willing to take advice. They have an attitude that they believe they know best, and won't learn from those around them, and it becomes self-limiting. I think what I'd add to what you two have eloquently described there is that if you go back to the stats I gave at the beginning, the two most important drivers of stress levels in organizations are the role, so your workload and the expectations in the role, and then the second one was the behavior of your manager. So if we're talking about development initiatives, for me they're fundamental to engagement and well-being in organizations, because you have to give people the tools to do the job, the skills to do the job, the support to do the job, the motivation, the mentoring, to be able to do the job. And you have to give line managers the tools to manage and motivate the teams around them, and to understand that the biggest influencer of culture in your organization is the behavior of your managers.
Yes.
So for me, professional development is just fundamental. If you're not developing the people around you, your managers, and then your managers developing your teams, I would red flag whether or not you've got the most effective organization you could have, because there's got to be, unless you're incredibly lucky that you hired instinctive managers, there's got to be opportunity for improving the engagement of the people around you, which ultimately we all know impacts on the success of the organization. So we're coming towards the end of the year. It has been a tough year. In the context of rejuvenating your team, what approaches and practices have you seen in organizations that can reignite enthusiasm and energy? What ideas can we offer to the people listening for things we've seen that have really helped spur teams on in that last 3 months of the year?
I mean, look, this comes down to inspirational leadership. You've got to be eternally optimistic as a leader, as a manager. Wallowing in self-pity because you've had a tough year isn't going to help anybody. It is about looking forward. It is about making sure that you're aware of what's going on in the market. You can see the opportunities, that you're speaking to clients and you're developing new opportunities. Even during a tougher year, we could point to lots of our clients and their people who have had great success this year. I can talk of, and I won't mention names, people that have had their best year ever. And I think there are always opportunities if you go seek them. What's really important is to celebrate success, making sure that everybody is aware of who's doing well. Even the minor triumphs should be broadcasted very loudly on a weekly or even daily basis. You've got to convey a can-do attitude as a leader. You've got to convey optimism. You need to consistently reinforce your vision for the business, where it's going, how we're going to get there, what's in it for the people that work in the business, not just financially, but from a career perspective and from a self-fulfillment perspective. You have to make sure people know in every which way and shape how much you value them. Not soft, hollow words, but in tangible ways, so people know you care. We talked a lot about demonstrating care, and Dave used the word authenticity. I think it's so important to make sure that people are aware of those things. A pat on the back can be good enough sometimes. You don't have to give people huge prizes, huge trips abroad, lots of financial benefits. All of those things are very lovely. Don't get me wrong. It's the reason why people go to work very often. But in the end, it's the kind words that we remember far longer than the paychecks that we received. And it's the teaching that we get. It's the care and direction that we receive from people that's genuine, the things we take with us, the legacy you leave behind, if you like, as a leader, that makes a huge difference. Dave mentioned just in this broadcast, his old boss, and the comment from his old boss from about 200 years ago, I think, probably in Dave's case. But those are the things that you carry with you, the wise words, the pat on the back, the gratitude you've received. Those things are super important. This point now in the year is when we double down. We really work very, very hard to prepare for next year, because we know that December's a poor month. So we have to put in the real effort during September, October, November to make sure that the beginning of next year is a good start for us all. So, we're working harder, we're pushing harder, a lot more activity going on, and a lot more to come in the next 6 weeks. And that's why we need to be very close and make sure we keep that buoyant environment.
Yeah, and just a few tips, I guess, Heather, just to add to Paul. So 4 things I wrote down that I know that individual organizations are doing. One is having a monthly breakfast meeting, where the breakfast meeting is at home and the owner sends out breakfast to every single member of the staff. They get a packet of cereal, they get some croissants, they get milk, they get sugar, and it comes in a pack. So it costs a little bit of money, but really not very much money. And then on a Monday, they all have breakfast together. We're talking about 14 people.
It's a great idea.
How much it costs, but as an idea, it really brings the team together, because they're not in the office on a Monday, but then they have breakfast together. And there's milk spilt everywhere. Another practical one, getting the staff to organise a Christmas event, rather than the owners saying, well, what should we do for Christmas this year? They picked a couple of people from the office and said, right, you organise what we're going to do. Another practical one, that they got each of their staff to make a video about what they do at the weekend, uploaded that to their own site, a microsite that they created, but it got that sense of, this is what we're all about when we're not at work. And the final one is, I know a company that's doing an advent calendar, and each day is a new idea for 2024. Now, sometimes when you say that to owners, they go, I don't want any more ideas. That's the last thing I want, is any more ideas, because I've got to implement them. The reality is, it depends on how you set that up. If you set it up that if you give an idea, we're going to implement it, then it often doesn't work. But if you set it up as some sort of ideas factory, that actually we're going to then discuss it all together and we'll pick the best ones, then it does work. So they're 4 practical things that companies are doing between now and Christmas that you could choose and say, actually, that may work for me, or not. But there's some things that are going on.
Yeah, I saw a lovely similar one to that, where everybody had a empty hamper.
Right.
And so every few days we had a specific goal or target or activity that was related to winning the next thing. So it would be ground coffee or cake or chocolates or brandy or champagne or whatever. And so you get a series of mini incentives going, which meant at the end of Christmas, people went home with a hamper which had as much or as little in as they'd achieved over the time. But you can really tailor your incentives then.
Good idea.
Yeah, it was good. Good. Okay. Well, I think we're very close to being out of time. And Howard's got a last question, which I'm going to completely ignore, which is about technology, because I think it's another one, which is a whole webinar's worth, thinking about technology and technology trends in terms of well-being. I think that's a
random question. I think that was after about the 3rd pint of Yorkshire, wasn't Yorkshire bitter, I suppose.
Yeah. So as we're heading up towards Q2 and our finish time, if there are any final thoughts you have on well-being and well-being initiatives and leadership and well-being,
look, I think I'm just going to sort of broad brush and make a statement, and that is, if you look after your people, they will look after you. And I've always adhered to that philosophy. And it's really important to do that when perhaps times are a bit more challenging. Anyone can be upbeat when results are great and they're making lots of money and there's loads of placements flying in and out. Great news. And anyone can be buoyant under those circumstances. But it's the support you provide to people when things are a bit tougher That's super important, because the good times will come round again. What goes down comes up, and up and down. We know, it's very cyclical. Most
And
of
not
us think
everybody's down at the moment,
not
There's a lot of
everybody. It's a
people
good
are still
point,
up.
Heather. And
Yeah.
not everybody is down. And we also think that next year, please God, will be an improved year. That we think that as we head towards the general election, we will start to see things improving and the economy improving. So you want to make sure your great people are with you as you go forward, and that's why I think you look after them in every which way, shape, and form that you can. Remind them of how valued they are.
Yeah. Dave, a final thought?
And for me, Heather, it's to you, look after yourself. That's the really important aspect. And it's okay, as we know, not to be okay. And if you want to talk to somebody, pick up the phone and talk to somebody you trust, somebody who may not be in the industry. Pick up the phone to one of us for a job. We're very happy to talk to you. But if you're not feeling great, that's okay. Recognize that and then try to do something about it, because you need to make sure you're okay as well.
Lovely. And my parting thoughts actually come from a report by Gallup on employee wellbeing and engagement, which I really enjoyed reading. And it's really about how you work in partnership with your employees on wellbeing. So it's not just about things that you as a leader have to do, that you impose on the organisation. It's about finding things that you can do jointly with the people who work for you. And they describe 7 catalysts for improving wellbeing in the organisation. So one is development. So provide development and think about well-being in your development. Think about recognition. Do you recognize good well-being? Do you recognize well-being successes? Communicate. Do you communicate important messages around culture and high performance? Are your incentives incentivizing the right things and driving the right behaviors? Are your events supporting thriving culture and positive behaviors? Have the rules and guidelines that you've got in place, are they working together, or are they against thriving? Are they causing the bottlenecks that Howard talked about in one of his questions? And your facilities, is it easy to get around in your office space? Is there a possibility of seeing outdoors, of seeing sky, of seeing green fields? And can you get outside, and can people collaborate in the place that you're in? So I think those are really 7 really interesting practical catalysts for leaders to think about in their organisation. So hope you've enjoyed listening to us talk about this today. And as Dave said, and we all agree, if anybody has anything they want to chat to us about wellbeing, please just pick the phone up and we'll have a chat. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you all again next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you, Dave. Speak to you guys soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good week, everybody. See you soon.